Well, welcome back, everybody. I'm Joel. This is Chase. Welcome to the Williams ELLEBY YouTube channel. And today we want to talk about a subject that doesn't get a whole lot of attention in personal injury law, but that is hunting safety, landowner liability, and things that you might encounter traveling to and from hunting places that might affect your personal safety and injuries and may somehow come back into personal injury law. But we want to talk about this here in November because a lot of people who are deer hunters are experiencing what we call the most wonderful time of the year with deer rut, especially out in the Midwest and all that. But I want to go through a few things to talk about keeping you safe, protecting you from liability if you happen to be a hunt club or a landowner, and things you might encounter when you're traveling to and from your hunting area. So first, let's talk about some basic things to help keep you safe when you are hunting.
Yeah, so obviously the number one thing as far as hunter safety is concerned, well, not number one, but the thing I think of the most is that anytime you're hunting, especially deer hunting, Joel and I love to deer hunt, is fall safety, right? You're either in a ladder stand, in a climber, or even, a blind, and there's always the risk of falling. So if you're in a ladder stand or a climber, it's very, very important to, one, check the equipment. Make sure it's not rusty, make sure it's attached to the tree, make sure your climber's working well. Always, always, always check the equipment, because the last thing you want is to start climbing a ladder stand. Next thing you know, the ladder starts to break, and here you go, you're timbering over. So that's the first thing. The next thing is you want to have a harness. I know it's sometimes a pain in the butt, especially when you're hunting when it's cold, to put the harness on and strap yourself in, to the tree and things like that. But that is super duper important, especially in those early morning hunts when you're tired and you're getting cozy and you just sort of close your eyes for a second and just kind of it's dark outside, right? You doze off. And next thing you know, you kind of jolt up. So that's very, very important. I would say probably falls, aside from obviously firearms and projectiles and things like that, are the number one thing you need to look out for.
Yeah, that's very important. So the second thing that you need to think about is how to get your equipment up in the tree, whether you're a bow hunter or a gun hunter. It's usually a bad idea to try to climb a tree stand or to try to go up a ladder stand while you're holding a firearm or while you're holding your bow, because you need both hands to properly climb the ladder. So we recommend using a rope or some type of pulley system with a carabiner on it, so that you climb up in the stand and then you pull your equipment up after you are secured in the stand. That will keep you safe and help prevent those falls too.
Third thing as far as hunter safety is concerned is don't drink alcohol when you're hunting. I know you go to the hunting club with your friends and things like that, and everyone wants to have a beer or drink. Don't do it while you're hunting. It's just not safe. Just wait till you get out of the stand and you get back to the camp and you're around the fire and things like that. But try to avoid as best you can not drinking while hunting. One, I think it's illegal in most states. The DNR will get you if you're drinking while hunting. But two, it's just not a smart thing to do.
Yeah. If you wouldn't do it before you drive, don't do it before you climb up in a stand or go into the woods with a firearm. So
that's right.
Don't smoke weed and go hunting. Try not to take prescription drugs that could affect your cognition and your balance and all that before you go hunting. All right, so number 4 is very important, because you never really know what's going to happen when you go hunting. You can take all the precautions in the world and you could fall in a hole, you could be attacked by an animal or anything like that, but make sure that you tell somebody where you're going to be. And with today's technology, if you have a cell signal, you can actually get to where you're going. You can tell somebody, hey Chase, I'm planning on going to this place in this wildlife management area in North Georgia, but then when I get there, I can actually, if I have a cell signal, send Chase a ping or what do they call them, pins, for exactly where I'm going to be at. And that way, I can say, hey, if you don't hear from me by 11 a.m., then call me, or let's figure out, send somebody out for me. Otherwise, I'll check in with you by then. That way, if something happens and you're unconscious, you've got a backup system or a buddy that knows where you're supposed to be.
Yeah, and also too, if you're hunting let's say you're hunting a hunting club and things like that, and you've got some people that are coming in and leaving at different times, and so you get in the woods early or whatever it might be, you want to pin in, what's what I call it, right? Pin in, let people know where you're going to hunt, so you're not sitting in the woods and someone comes in and you take a shot and someone's walking. You just want to know where everyone is, because like you said, you don't want to be in a situation where, one, you get hurt or get injured and no one knows where you are, but also, two, if you're hunting with other folks, you want to have an idea of where everyone is. So if, like I said, you take a shot or something like that, you don't want to be shooting in anyone's direction.
Yeah. And along with letting someone else know where you're at, number 5 would be know where you're at. There are tons of apps for your smartphone that are out there today. OnX comes to mind. That's the one I like to use, but there are others that you can actually track your location. So you can have your phone up and turn on this tracker feature and know exactly where you're going. So you know whether you're walking up on a different stand location, you know if you're coming up to a property line. You can even tell off of topo maps whether you're coming up to a cliff or something that might present a terrain feature challenge for you, but know where you're at so that, if you hike back in the woods a mile, 2 miles, 3 miles, and it gets dark, you can get out.
Right. And you always, if you have time, and depending on where you're hunting, go scout where you're going to hunt before you actually go out there. Go in the daytime so you know what you're looking at, you know what to expect. Never just go blind to a hunting spot and just, kind of post up.
You might have to define scout for any non-hunters.
Scout's just going out and, like if I know I'm going to go hunt, 250 acre plot and I know there's, a food plot here, hardwoods over here. You go out in the middle of the day, go out in July or August before the season just to kind of see what the terrain is, see if you find any markings or anything like that to show where you want to hunt, to see where animals are moving, find a good tree to hang a stand, whatever it might be. You just don't want to go out there completely blind on the first day, of opening season and try to go hunt some property that you're completely unfamiliar with.
Yeah. And so let's talk about firearm safety. What's the number 1 rule of firearm safety?
Well, treat every single gun as if it's loaded. It seems easy, if you've been hunting for a long time, it's, kind of, well, obviously the gun's not loaded, whatever it might be, but accidents happen all the time, and it never hurts to take a second just to double check to make sure that the gun is completely unloaded. I never, ever, ever have a loaded gun. I always keep the bullets in my pocket, have my rifle on my shoulder, and then when I get to the stand, get situated, the last thing I do is put the bullets in the gun and have it ready to go. But it's always, always extremely important to treat every single gun as if it's loaded. Yeah, and that's for your own safety and if you're hunting with somebody else, because one of the most dangerous times is after somebody harvests an animal and they're all excited. They may forget where the barrel of the gun is pointing or whatever, and accidents happen at that point. So even when you're in the heat of the moment and you're in the excitement, just always remember, hey, where the gun is pointed is the most important thing. But speaking of protecting yourself in a firearm hunting situation, it's usually a good idea to wear hunter's orange, and that's those brightly colored vests or jackets or hats that people will wear, so that especially if you're hunting public land or if your state law requires you to wear them, other hunters can easily see you, but the animal that you're pursuing can't. Right. So the next thing to obviously be very, very aware of when you're hunting is to be sure of the target that you are getting ready to shoot at. And you hear stories all the time in the news about how someone's hunting and they shoot their buddy who's across the field. Whenever you're even thinking about pulling the trigger or looking in the scope or looking through whatever you're firing, whether it's a bow, crossbow, gun, make sure you know exactly what it is that you are about to try to harvest. If you have any questions that you're like, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, just wait.
All right, so number 9, the next thing to think about when you're getting ready to go out in the woods and while you're in the woods is the weather. You see it with sports, if there's lightning in the area, they're going to call the game, they're going to pause the game, whether it's golf, baseball, football, whatever it happens to be. You certainly don't want to be 15 feet up in a tree in the middle of the field when a lightning storm moves in. If you live in a state where you could get blizzard-like conditions or anything that can endanger you while you're in the woods, look ahead of time, find out what the weather's supposed to be, and then from time to time while you're in the field, check on your phone with whatever weather app you like to use and make sure that there's no bad weather coming in on you.
Yeah, and especially with bad weather, like, we hunt things like that, like thunderstorms will come flying in, lightning will come in out of nowhere. If you know that it's going to come and you can expect it, don't risk it. It's not worth it. I know a lot of times you might only have a day or two to go hunt and, it's peak season, weather's right, everything's, looking perfect, and you want to get in, you want to stay in the woods. But don't. One, because it's completely not safe and you could get injured, but especially if you're deer hunting, I mean, deer aren't going to be out when it's lightning and thundering, so why should you be out when it's lightning and thundering?
Dude, there's a stand at the hunting club that I'm in Alabama that's in a tree in a clear cut, and that tree was hit by lightning. The stand's in it, and it split it right down the middle, and the wooden parts of the stand are split right down the middle. If somebody had been in that tree, they'd be dead.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you got to be careful about that.
Not worth it.
Finally, number 10, as far as protecting yourself, is know your state's laws. You certainly don't want to get any tickets for doing anything illegal, but most of those laws are in place for the safety of the hunters and the people in the community. So just familiarize yourself with your state laws and make sure you stay safe and outside of, we call them old green jeans here in Blakely, the DNR game wardens. Stay out of their crosshairs. So, all right, so let's talk a little bit about landowner liability and hunting club liability. And for those of you that don't know, a hunting club is basically where a group of people will come together. There may be a 2,000 acre plot of land that costs a bunch of money to lease to hunt for a year, but a bunch of people will come together and split that cost, and they all have equal right to hunt it. And lots of times the club will have a president and a vice president and all that. So it's a lease of a larger tract of land that different people split. So landowner liability and club liability, the first thing I would say is make sure that you purchase liability insurance in case something does happen that could be tied back to you. You at least have that insurance there for liability protection.
Yeah, exactly, definitely. And most of the, people, I would assume you wouldn't think that there would be actually policies written for folks that go hunting, but there are, and they're specific to hunters, specific to landowners that are leasing property. So that's, I think, almost a mandatory that you should have that liability insurance with your hunting. So the second thing, if you're a landowner and leasing the club, and if you're sort of the person responsible for it, you want to make sure, you want to check all of your stands, make sure they're in good condition, make sure they're clean. Just like we talked about earlier, how the hunters need to check the stand, the landowner, the lease, the person who's ever responsible for the lease, they need to make sure the property's safe for the hunters to come and hunt on.
Especially if they're the ones placing the stands out there.
That's right.
Make sure that the straps that you secure to the tree haven't dry rotted and all that kind of stuff, because you don't want somebody to climb up a stand that you provided and then it falls out of the tree. Number 3, I would say, is make sure there's controlled access to the property. You can do that in many ways. If the property is completely fenced, then you can put a lock on the gate to make sure nobody comes in. At a minimum, I would recommend putting posted, no trespassing signs and things like that up. And then also marking the borders of the property so that the people that are hunting on your property or that are members of your club will know exactly where their right to hunt begins and where it ends, so that they don't inadvertently trespass onto somebody else's property where they could get injured.
Yeah, and I would say, going back to the gates and things like that, if you're on a property that has multiple points of access, and you have the swinging gates and things like that, try to keep them closed. It seems pretty common sense. You want to keep the gates closed and things like that, but it's important to keep them closed. Important to control the access to your property, because if you have knowledge and know people come and trespass on your property and things like that, and you don't do anything to try to keep them out, it could expose you to potential liability as well. So keep the gates closed, keep them marked, well marked, keep them or upkeep the gates as well to make sure they work. So
yep. And I think the next one's super important for hunting clubs, or if you have multiple people hunting on the property at the same time. Come up with some system to make sure that everybody that's hunting that day knows where everybody else is, at least the general area. You can have a text message chain that goes back and forth so everybody knows, hey, Chase is going to hunt, in this stand, Joel's going to be in this stand, or Chase is going to chase turkeys over there, and Joel's going to do it over here. You can have pin boards where people actually physically make a mark on a map to show you where they're at. Any kind of system to make sure that people aren't right on top of each other is especially important if firearms are involved.
Yeah, absolutely.
So have some kind of system like that. All right, so those are some good recommendations for landowners and hunting clubs. Let's talk about people that travel when they hunt. Most of the time when you're traveling, you're going to do it in a car, unless you're going all the way to the other side of the country. And you'll do it in an airplane, but even then, you're probably going to get in a car at some point.
Right. I would say the first thing I would do, especially if you're traveling, pulling a trailer with equipment, because you see that a lot. I got friends that'll go out west or go to Iowa, wherever it might be, and they're pulling a trailer. You got a bunch of inventory, a bunch of stuff. Know what you've packed. You know, something as simple as taking photos, doing a mental checklist, writing it down, and knowing what you have in your trailer, all the equipment, because if you get in a wreck and that trailer gets trashed, you want to make sure you know what's in there, because when you go to make a claim against either that fault insurance company or your own insurance company, you know what you're going to be reimbursed for. And another, you know, kind of piggybacking on that too, if you're pulling a trailer with a, you know, side-by-side or four-wheeler or whatever it might be, make sure there's insurance on that as well. I think it's kind of common sense to do that. Most people don't think to do that if it's something that's not street legal, but definitely make sure that's insured as well.
Another really basic thing is just make sure you have the insurance on your vehicle. I think Chase was alluding to that, but it goes without saying that whatever state you're coming from, make sure you're complying with the minimum laws in that state to make sure you have insurance to begin with. And then also, if you are carrying firearms across state lines, I mean, we could debate forever and ever about, you know, gun rights and all that kind of stuff, but the fact is, if you're going to travel to gun hunt, you're most likely going to be carrying a weapon with you. So know the state's laws and what you need to do, if anything, in order to carry a firearm across state lines.
Well, all right, I think that wraps it up for our video on hunter safety and tips. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. If you have any questions or want us to hit on anything else, please comment in the section below. Like the video, share, tell your friends. I know they're probably dying to follow our YouTube page, so I think it's best that you tell them about it so they can follow our YouTube page. And yeah,
Subscribe,
that's right. I always forget that one word, subscribe. So definitely subscribe. And we will see y'all next week.